always easier.
Do you mind me asking why you need Docker files for MAR and those other subfolders? That never made sense to me. Why
Okay,
you need?
yeah, so MAR is basically the rule. It's we call it a file type, but what it is it's a rule for Urbit to know how to process and represent whatever this file is as a nano. So without a mark file, Clay is going to tell you I can't do anything with it. So right now, if I go back to comment flap and I bar commit flap, it's going to crash and tell me error building docket 0. I don't know how to do this is what it's telling me. I have no rule that says how do I load a docket 0.
Okay, that makes sense.
So let me copy mar docket 0 to flap mar, and the common thing that I end up doing is just hitting. Okay, so there's a lib docket hoon that we have to copy as well. So copy landscape lib docket.hoon to flap lib, and then try bar commit. And if we have everything, it will load. Nope, sir. Okay, also a sir. Gotta make sure you're in the right. All right, so there's a mar docket 0, there's a lib docket, and there's a sir docket. And I dare say that's all of them. All right, fantastic. So now it commits, it tells me that it's uploaded everything. It scrolls off the edge of the screen because this is a commit and it has an absurdly long name, but now we can do something with this. All right. So now we have this in our folder, but we don't have anything hooked up to it. So if we were to navigate to, let's actually, let me find the code for this comment since I don't care if I leak that to you. And let me go into a browser window here and share this with you. All right, oh, that's Zod. I actually want 8081. I must be running a Zod in the background somewhere. All right, so if I paste that there, all right. Well, that's my other comment. I have 2 comments running. Here we go. All right, so go ahead and let this load. With a docket file now, this will actually show up on my grid. It should. Oh, I haven't bar installed it yet. If I bar install our flap, yeah, there we go. So now Flappy Bird shows up here. All the docket file is doing is basically registering it with grid so that you can access information. If I click on it and try to load it, nothing's going to load. Like there is nothing to load. There's no index file. There's no anything to be able to show you. All right, so back over to this one. All right, so the first thing we want to do is we want to just serve the contents of original Flappy Bird from our Urbit shell. All right. There's a walkthrough video I linked that sort of shows you exactly from a JavaScript perspective how this game works and why you want game.js and everything. We actually don't care for Urbit purposes. We just need to actually be able to load this. So if I were to, one way I could do this is I could create inside of Flap, inside of app, I will create a new folder that is called Flap. This is going to contain my front end files. This is different than globbing. I'm going to be directly serving this remote. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to copy everything inside of all right, CP original Flappy Bird JavaScript star to Comet Flap flap app flap dash O. Yes. All right, so now if I look at flap, where did that go? Is it just not loading? Comet flap, flap, app. I wonder if it's just not refreshing on the visibility there, because OS Comet flap, flap, app, flap. Everything should be there. Curious. I'm guessing this is just the VS Code file browser is refusing to refresh. Is that an undo or a refresh? Refresh Explorer. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. For whatever reason, it was stuck. All right. Now, if I bar commit on flap, first thing I'm going to run into is it can't build a wave. It doesn't have mar wave. There's no mar wave that exists here. All right. So we need to create a way of actually displaying this information. All right. So if we think about like what is a wave file, one of the most fundamental ways that we can distinguish files is between a binary file and a text file. And a text file can have various kinds of structure to it, not necessarily human readable or intended to be edited by humans, but we're talking about, you have an XML file, you have a YAML file, you have a CSV, you have something like this, where your fundamental data representation is text bytes in order. Or you can have a binary file where everything is zipped up in some more compact, completely human illegible way, like in bytes, and things are just stored that way. A wave file is that latter kind. It's a binary file. It's nothing like a text file. So what we want to do is we want to find something else that's a binary file, like PNG, and we want to just copy it and change the parts that are similar here. In a MIME type sense, it's going to be served as bytes, or what a MIME calls octs, right? So eight bits together. I don't know why they didn't go with bytes, but they went with octs to describe the same thing. So we can actually just copy, let me see if there's a way to just, yeah, all right. So I'm going to call this wave.hoon, and everywhere it says, so I need audio as wave. I don't need to change as aux because we're also just serving binary. I have nothing to change here because the MIME type and the noun stuff is, yeah, otherwise like it is identical except for changing the MIME type that will be presented to the browser when it actually tries to load this information. So that's like the simplest way to end up writing a MARC file is to need to make a single change like this. If I come back down here, try and bar commit again. Okay, everything loaded, everything pulled, and yeah, I should be able to load this and share it. So let me come back and see if we can see this in the Firefox. Oops. aren't you showing me?
Did you do installer flap?
I did. Well, I'm because I'm seeing it in landscape. I'm wondering if I. No, it's not that. Let me look at the inspect tools. Am I getting an error from something? This might be a place where something's been updated and implicitly in the back. All right, so I'm just getting the body. Console. Oh, that's a warning, not an error. So that shouldn't be barring it. Yeah, just the one warning. Let me try just opening index.html directly, make sure that that part works. All right, there's. Okay, so this is what we expect to see for the regular game, is every time I click or I do space, actually I have to click, it's not even space bar. Right, like this game is just, it's like trying to steer a sack of potatoes. I don't think I've ever gotten more than like 3. Yeah, so anyway, that's the game dynamic. Should actually be serving all of it from Urbit now, that's what I'm wondering about. Sometimes you run into cross-origin request issues, but I don't think that's what's going on here. Let me double check my notes and see if there's something obvious I'm missing because I'm talking instead of paying attention to what I'm doing. All right, so we have our repo. Ah! I know what's wrong. What I do with desktop.bill, well, I'm not actually sure if this makes a difference or not. For a purely front end, there's no agent. Let me see if this makes a difference. Oh, sorry, I'm doing this in a different window. Desk.bill was empty, was null. No, if I add it, then I get that there is no flap. Not doing. We have the mark. Okay, anyway, it should work after I do the next step. Anyway, I thought I could serve it without any other editing there, but that's okay. We'll get there. We'll get there. This is the fun thing about doing live tutorials, is when they go off script. All right. So I added flap and then it complained that I don't have an app flap yet, which is true. I don't. I have a folder that has a front end, but I don't have a flap.boon agent that I can refer to. So, all right. So, basically, I've copied in those files. Okay. All right. So let's talk about the data model. What's the thing? And if you aren't on my list here, then let me know that you're here so I can keep track, and we can, if you attend enough of these, then you get something. All right, so our data model. So if we go to index, and game. So it does know things about the score. So it knows the current score. And if I recall correctly, yeah, it knows the score.best. So it knows your it knows your current score, and it knows your all-time high score. All right, that's the only information that this JavaScript game tracks in terms of scores, and that's going to be the kind of information that we're going to share and transmit. So when we write a structure file, let's come here and insert and create a new flap.hoon. This is the only kind of information that we need. So we need some sort of peer-to-peer identifier. So we have a pat p identifier. We call it friend. We call it sheep. We call it whatever we want. And we have the four-letter score, which is a pat ud, and then scores is going to be a map from pat p to pat ud. But it's so structurally matches these, but we can always refer to it using basically what's a type alias, right? Like it's just an alternate name for that type that makes it clear in context what our intent is at a particular junction. The only action we can take, so we're going to gain a score by an action, which is a communication from our browser session to our local ship. So I'm hosting something in my client, and I'm serving it from my ship. And so an action is that communication. I'm going to call it a vertical communication between your client and your server, from your browser and your server. An update is a peer communication, and we're going to call it a lord because you can lord your high score over your friends. And this means that you're transmitting to someone what the current score is, not necessarily the high score, but you're transmitting the current score and the person to whom it corresponds. We actually don't have to explicitly specify this because it is included when we transmit it, but it's nice to have it like a little bit more transparent just for writing cleaner code for us down the road a little bit. That's not necessarily a general rule, but in this case, that kind of makes it a little bit easier. So the JSON that we're going to have to parse will look like this. This is the JSON that what we'll receive from the browser after we tell it to notify things. We're going to tell it that we've gained a score, a current score. So this is what corresponds to an action. If we want to process this as a Hoon value, the reparser that we end up with looks like this. Now, reparsers are strange, this DSL, this domain-specific language that does these things. The part to read out here is that we have an object, which is this map. It's this gain to map, and then inside of it we have another object that contains a key of score, which is this first part, and I could write it this way too. And then it's going to contain a value 15, which is going to be interpreted by a gate that is number integer. It is the strangest way to build things. I admit it. Here it is, here it's built, here it works. So this is, if we put this directly in our mark file, then anytime we receive a JSON, it will automatically be turned into a flap action for us. That's the really nice thing about marks at this point, is when we receive information, it automatically transforms through the types that are available into what we need, and we don't have to think about it anymore at this point. So this is now going to be in mar, let's do a new folder, flap, and then inside of that we'll do action.hoon, paste that whole file. All right, and then there will also be an update.hoon, and it's a little simpler because it doesn't even deal with JSON. It just deals with updates. So it knows how to pull an update as a noun. It knows how to turn any noun back into an update. That's all that it's making the claim for in this particular case. Whereas action knows how to turn a JSON into a noun and a noun into an action, so it can transform it however you need it to be transformed when you're processing things. All right, now we need our actual flap.hoon agent. It's a little longer. Let me see if I can, well, let me paste it in the chat. I don't know how easy this is going to be to use. Okay, let me close this and we'll take a look at what's going on. All right. One of the things I'm doing different here is I'm importing everything on a separate line so I can annotate why it has been imported. There's default agent, which handles what happens with arms that I haven't dealt with yet. There's debug, schooner, server. Schooner and server are both HTTP request handlers. They make it much easier to just receive an HTTP request as a type and then say, okay, we'll send a 200 OK or send me a 404 with this error message, that sort of thing. They make it a lot easier to handle those things. And actually, I haven't copied schooner over yet, so we'll grab schooner in a moment as well. Then these faz tars, which accept a mark as their argument, a name, a mark, and then a clay path inside the test. This is actually pulling the information that corresponds directly to my JS, my PNG, my WAV files. So I'm building these explicitly, and when they are requested, I will be able to serve them explicitly from my app file here. Regular boilerplate. My state is my current score and my known high score. This version is going to be completely local. It's not yet going to communicate with friends. I haven't imported pals or anything, any libraries to do with that. So to start us off, we're just going to serve it locally, and then we'll worry about adding in friends in a minute. We already have the plumbing for that ready in the ser file, but we do not have it. We don't actually use it yet in here. All right, standard boilerplate, instantiate our state, call it state 0, call it state, turn off verbosity so that we're not printing out terribly long error messages. All right, so when we start, one thing we're going to do differently than what you've seen in App School is we're going to explicitly register an endpoint with error. Because I guess this is probably why it wasn't serving directly from the Urbit, is because I hadn't done this step yet. So this is going to tell Air to connect everything that comes through apps flap to this agent. Any requests that come in connect to this agent. Any requests that go out, are served from this endpoint. So here's our endpoint that we're explicitly registering here. On save does nothing special, on load does nothing special, on poke does have, okay, if we receive a flap action, which means we've received a JSON of an action, which means we're gaining a score. First, we're going to assert that we're getting a gain, which is true, right? Like there's no other kind of thing you can do. So that's almost a superfluous assertion here. Then we're going to say if our score is not higher than our high score, then just update the current score. In more explicit terms, there's no list of cards, and there is a state change, which is just updating our current score, our current known score. If it is if it is higher than our current high score, then also update our high score in our state and return no action. So there no cards are issued from this update right now. Later on, we'll want to notify friends too. But right now, we don't have anything to do to notify friends. Oh no, it's updating. I guess that's landscape. Should be fine. All right. If I receive an HTTP request, a put or whatever, then I have a handle HTTP arm that's just going to serve back out. This is going to use the server library and the schooner library. It's going to send responses. If someone is not authenticated, send a 302 to redirect after you log in back to apps flap. If you've received a post request, then this is a JSON, so we're going to djson HTML. Looks like that's a call. We'll have to check all this to make sure this does what we want. Unpack the action and then poke ourselves with that action. So if we receive a JSON update, unpack it, and then poke us. If it's a GET request, then send the actual contents of Flap UI as an HTML response. There's also an endpoint that we expose, which is Flap who am I, just to print the actual ship name value. This is going to make it slightly easier for us to expose the ship name when we start building a leaderboard later on, to just have an endpoint for requesting this information. And we also have an endpoint for requesting our current score and our current high score nested under Flap. So nothing too fancy there. And if you were building a different website, you would, and you were serving everything explicitly from your Urbit ship, you would end up with some sort of similar way of handling GET and post requests as those come in. Now, we also need to be able to refer to our game.js and the sprite images and all these other things. This is the same as the index, when the index HTML, where'd that end up living? I guess that's under Flap here. When game.js refers to these values here, it's going to be referring to whatever context it's being served from, which is the ship we are running. So then when you actually load these values, so this is .source, but when you actually load the value, audio goes ahead and loads it, it'll make the request into app, and then this is where it gets returned to app. It gets returned as whatever that build was of Flap Audio S, which is audio sound effects, and then with the MIME type of audio wave attached to it, which is just the header that it has there. Yeah, OnAgent is just some subscription stuff for the browser to be able to receive updates as well. And then if you make a request to air to register an endpoint, you also need to handle the return sign that you successfully bound, or that it was already bound, or you didn't have permission, or whatever happens. Like I mentioned in App School, there will probably be a change where you're actually accessing a subdomain associated with each desk, rather than explicitly registering like whatever your Urbit URL /apps/agent name. But so this part won't really change, but the way that we bind things will probably change as a result of that. All right, the other thing I said I needed was Schooner. So let me go ahead and grab the Schooner library, which I think has no strange dependencies. It imports server and only server. Okay, fantastic. All right. I will give you the URL for this in a moment, so you have that as well. And I'm going to save this in lib. Schooner.home. All right, this is a updated, pretty comprehensive Schooner desk that's posted there. All right, Schooner has a bunch of handlers for, if it receives a certain kind of audio wave or whatever, then it knows how to package everything as bytes, weld the right type of HTML content header to it, and return that value back out. So the nice thing about using Schooner and server is you actually don't have to think about how am I explicitly constructing an HTML response header and returning that back. I can just pass it off to, I guess, yeah, like here, I'm using send from Schooner, and I'm passing plain text, which is then a tape of my high score as a SendUD is what that would do, right? So if I scow SendUD 5, this turns that number into a tape. That's what that does. So that's just plain text being served back there. All right, let me see. Let's try a bar commit and see what the damage is. Find NJSON. Oh, I have run afoul of, should be n::JSON. Let's try djson. Okay, I don't see a djson anywhere. And I should actually make a note to correct that in the upstream NJSON. Okay. And we're failing on line 199. This oct. So I'm giving it as a text, but I need to give it as a tape. Okay, let's try as ox like that and see if it's happy with that. That's a type issue. Okay, there we go. All right. Now we're failing on not seeing the path app flap audio SFX point wave. Error validating, file not found. Okay, all right. Means everything's parsing is valid here. So let's come back up here and see. Ah, okay, we have an interesting problem. All right, in Urbit, an underscore is not a valid part of a term or a TAS. So I can't use it in a file name. It's an invalid file name, just like if I uppercased things. Like Urbit just Clay can't handle that. And so I'm not actually sure if any of these things even synced up there because they're not valid names. So what I do need to do then is I need to rename each one of these with a hep instead of a cab. All right. Could be worse. It could be everything having to fit in 8.3 names, like old school DOS. All right, let's try bar commit now and see how that behaves. I think it was image sprite.png, wasn't it? Yes. Okay. All right. Gall booted flap. Let me just bar install just to make sure. Pull flap less debug. All right. So I currently have no state. All right. Now let's come back over to. Let's come back over to Firefox and see if I can get. That's the original. Let me try this. This is the. All right, so click here. That's something. Okay, what's going on in our?
Won't you have to change the front end file to refer to the images with the hep in it now?
Yes, so I'll need to change game.js. You're right. I don't think that's the problem that I'm actually running into here. It might be. I will definitely hit that problem at some point. But I'm also wondering, let's just bar commit and see if that gets us any farther. Loading failed, flap 1826. Let me see if I did anything. Had to do anything funky with the. In index, I need to explicitly serve flap game JS. I have to do it. Oh, that's why I have to do it in Urbit format, or it doesn't know to look in the right spot, and I have to do the same thing in game JS. That's why. It's because an Urbit path doesn't look the same. And JavaScript doesn't care. It just cares that when it hits whatever it identifies as that path name, it gets the value back. Okay, I think that's what's going on. It couldn't find game.js because it was looking in the global namespace. Oh, sorry, I'm not showing you what I did there. Okay, all right. Let me show you what I did, and then we'll come back to what's the problem with screen sharing. There's just too much going on here. Okay. Remember a minute ago what this looked like was this line 27 here, audio sfx.die.wave. What it has to look like is this. It has to be relative to the Urbit ship identifier. So I'm changing the file extension to a faz, and I'm adding flap faz in front of the whole path. So I have to do that for every resource that's loaded in game.js, and I have in indexed HTML, I have to change it so it looks for flap game.js. And so this is inside of the app folder, so relative to the agent and everything that's getting served here. All right. Any questions about that? I think, yeah. Clearly, it's serving now. So, all right, we've gotten everything to the point where we can actually run this from our own ship in about an hour. It's not bad. We knew where we were headed, but the idea is that you can actually do this with any off-the-shelf JavaScript game. Like what I just did is just saying, what's the minimum set of changes I need to make to run this on an Urbit ship. I want to get a 1, so I have a. All right, there we go. So now we actually have a high score. So we have a 0 and a 1. I don't know what a medal comes from, but there's a placeholder for it. All right, so now we can actually run this game, and now we can talk about let's hit some of the other endpoints like flap who am I. Okay, this gives me the shift back as plain text or whatever. We'll use that to simplify things in a minute when we start building the leaderboard. All right, yeah. So this is if you want to take an off-the-shelf game and serve from an Urbit ship, that's what's required. That's all that's required is fixing the pads. Setting up, none of that poke stuff or anything is even being used yet. All the agent file needs to do is build everything, and in handle HTTP, it needs to handle HTTP arm for handling HTTP requests, which will come in as standard, and then it returns in response to post or get like what it actually needs to build out of Schooner and server used together. So that much of this is boilerplate. You can copy that into any future project, and it'll just work. All right, so now we have this. And if we go look at my work list from a minute ago, all right, so we have a front end, we have a data model, we have a back end. We can actually, are we storing scores? Is this actually processing those? Okay, we're not actually passing scores back yet, it looks like. Let me see if I made any. I'll just handle that at the same time that we added PALS integration. All right, so if we go back to Sir flap, which is this one. All right, we know we're gonna have friends, scores, and our scores is gonna be a map of friend to score. So we'll be able to do these things. Huh, half my keyboard functionality is gone. My arrow keys aren't working. It's very odd. There they are. Okay, I don't know what that was. Okay. All right, so we have these things. All right, let's go ahead then. We do need to handle a state change now. So that's the next thing we need to do is our current flap state 0, can store a score and a high score. It doesn't receive them yet, but it can store them. But we actually also want to keep track of the scores, the things we know from our peers. So let's upgrade to a state 1. So this will take a score, it'll take a high score to score, and it will also take a list scores. All right, shouldn't do anything else. And if we do that, we will also need, on load, we'll need an upgrade rule. So essentially what an upgrade rule is doing is it's saying, if I have a, it's actually correct for 1 and now it's incorrect for 0. Look at the head tag of my current state, and based on that, tell me how to change what's going on so that I type match the current state. So in this case, we're going to need to add scores. All right, and so we need to add our old high score to our current state. Okay, so this is what we end up with as our onload. So we're going to initialize scores when we make the state transition by adding our current high score to our table of high scores, in essence. And then anytime we get a pure state change using an update, these will modify. All right, we also want to go ahead and load PALS, which means we need to copy. Let's see, did I bar mount PALS? All right, PALS is mounted. CV comment flap ls. All right, so I have flap, I have landscape PALS. So I'm going to copy PALS Sir PALS to flap Sir. And I think there's a lib PALS too that we're also going to need. Did he move that? Debug, rudder, sigil. Let me check my notes real quick and see what. Maybe it was a mark. I thought there was another PALS file. Okay, there's PALS. Okay, PALS mark. All right, and this should enable us to, this is still on Flap. We've loaded those additional, all right, so now our problem is when we load this list of files, on line 61, oh, version state also needs to include new states. That's why. Okay. Oh, and this needs to change to 1. Okay. It's good for you to see this, because you're going to run into it every time you try and do one of these things. The other thing that I just realized is there's a starter template directory that has a space in the name, so it's not uploading, but we actually don't need it. So I'll just remove that from the front end stuff there as well. We actually don't need this README, markdown README either in our front end. So, all right, little bit cleaner there. Oh no, actually it was loading it with a space in the name. Interesting. I would have thought that was failing. Okay. All right. Now, we have pals, we've loaded pals, the ability to have pals. We haven't changed anything, so there's no, nothing else has happened as a result of this. Okay, so if you haven't used pals before, pals is a really simple contact manager that basically keeps track of other ships, and you can request that someone be your friend. They can request that you be their friend. And if you both agree, then you're marked as friends. Otherwise, you're marked as a target or a leech. So my targets are the people to whom I have requested a connection, a social connection, who have not responded. And my leeches are the people who have requested to me, to whom I have not responded. Or I can delete it, and then it just goes away. It doesn't have like a rejected state. It just stops existing. So we're going to base our leaderboard on our targets, on our outgoing requests, just for simplicity. We're going to put it together that way. In the onPoke arm, we're going to be able to receive with flap action. We would like to not only, all right, if our current score is not higher, then we just change our current score. We don't do anything else. If we, actually let's do this as a col hep of this, and then col sig statistics. All right, I like this structure the best. I think this is, except I'm doing this backwards, because your list is first. All right, so now we're going to have a card here, and we're going to need to give a fact back along whatever happens. And so the next thing you give is a list of subscription paths, right? So we're going to, anyone who subscribes to Flap in our Flap agent is going to receive updated scores with a mark of Flap update. And we're going to mark update of a Lord, spell that right, score tis score not action, and then the identifier is us. So this now is what our update looks like. So this is a regular subscription. We haven't handled like notifying people when they originally subscribe or whatever, but this is the piece that we need to do. The other thing that's going to change is now we are going to receive flap updates. And this is going to take place not here in poke, because those are not pokes. Those are responses to subscriptions. So those are going to take place in on agent. All right, so right now on agent can receive a fact, and if the fact is a flap update, then we crash. We actually don't do anything with it right now. What we'd like to do instead So we're going to receive the update, we're going to unpack it using a zapgal. We're going to assert that it's a lord, which is, again, superfluous. We already know this. If it is greater than my current high score for that friend using a map lookup, or if it's not greater than, then don't do anything. Just don't respond to it. If it is greater than, then output a message and update what you actually have here. So changes to paths are going to happen this way. The other thing we need to know is we need to know who our pals actually are. And so this is going to be, these are also going to come in on agent, but they're going to come in along the path new pals instead of flat. So when I receive a wire, it comes in along a wire. This is this identifier. These come in along new pals. And so one of the options at the level of this right here, let me make sure I'm in the right spot. Okay, so right here, this level, I need to indent all of this one, I think. And then dedent this. Okay, so if it comes in along flap, then it's a flap update or whatever. If it comes in along new pals, then it is either I am meeting someone, which means someone has added me as a pal, and I let them know what my current score is, which is just a regular pass out of value. Or no, this is subscribed to them. And if they are if we're deleting our friendship on either one's part, then we remove them from our current list of scores, del by scores, and we notify that we're leaving the subscription to their flap agent. That's all that's taking place in this case here. And it feels like this should also be like a little more legible if I did it in full indentation notation like that. All right, if I have correctly counted okay, I think, and then if it's not along that, then it's a kick, and we go down the other kinds of things that we need here. If I've done this in the right order, this ought to work. No, I'm off by one somewhere. Okay, so let me just copy the whole thing and replace it with the one that I know is correct. And it is the same code, it's just making sure that I have the right, everything lined up in the right spot. 244. Why is the head of update trying to evaluate? Maybe I'll try the other order here and just see if it's happy with that. Okay, well, seemed to have solved that problem. 282. It doesn't like something about this card. Why don't you like this card? Mint vein means there's an error case that we're not handling. These are all what-lesses, which means they should just fall back to the default, and we shouldn't have that kind of problem. So if we go to flap, we get a fact, a kick, a watch ack. If we go to new pals, we get a fact. What-less, what-less. Is this kick supposed to be inside of here? Maybe that's the problem. Okay, I guess I was off a line on my alignment of these things. The better practice, which I didn't do here, the best practice is to mark the end of what you are checking at the end of the TISs, especially when you have these really long blocks that have terminators corresponding to them. All right, 142.9, let's debug that. Now I'm sending it. This is something to do with the fact that it didn't have a tape and now it wants a tape. And now I'm sending it a cord and tape. All right, 7411. Oh, same thing. It's wants the type at the beginning of the type assertion, which I guess is a reasonable request. All right, reloading flap. That's promising. I'll have to adjust that order to make that happy there. Oh no. All right, 58.3. What we're getting out does not look like a quick card cab this. Why does it not? All right, our version state is state 0 and state 1. State 1 is 1, scores, scores, high score. State 0 is 0, score, high score. On load is zapgal of version of old state into version state. If I have a 1, then I just yield the old state because there's no change. If I have a 0, then I have to update it, which I do by pushing this value back out. One possibility, which seems likely to me, is that I actually wrote my rules in such an order as to get myself in an inconsistent state. If that's the case, then nuking it and reviving it should Yeah, okay. So what happened was when it first crashed on the 1.0 stuff earlier, it put it in, I managed to get it into an inconsistent state where now it had the wrong state type head, but was no longer able to follow the update rule that I had written. This will happen occasionally in development. You obviously shouldn't push code that does this, but if you can bar nuke it and then bar revive it and it works, then you're probably fine. You know, don't ship code that does that, but you can fix it. You can fix it this way. All right, so this now should. All right, so if I look at pals. All right, I have one outgoing pal, which is pal dev. All right, so now I need to. Other comment's name is Mipid Pinlug Loshek Taston blah blah blah. All right, so let's save that one. Come back to Firefox. Come to pals. All right, I'm going to add that person as a pal. All right, it doesn't need to go both ways because I only need to be able to share one way. All right, yeah, so pals just gives you this nice table of people that you know and are aware of. All right, so now it's, in essence, we have the ability to support a leaderboard. All right, we actually don't render it yet. We don't do anything with it, but we actually can communicate this information. So let me go to the other commit. And load pals there and add all right, there's pals. That was kind of wild. Did you see that? It booted into landscape, and it was like old school OS1 landscape was displaying here. That's nostalgic. It's kind of funny that it does that. Okay, so let me accept my pal on both ends. All right, so we're pals on both ends. Now this ship does not have Flap installed, so I also need to install Flap on this ship. What I can do to do that is on my first commit, I need to mark it as, oh gosh, what's the treaty registration thing? I don't remember offhand. I can mark it as public, but I think there's a treaty command I need to do as well. Let me check what that is. Coal treaty bar publish desk. All right, so if I run on my my Flap comment, if I run coal treaty bar publish Flap, then I should be able to install it from this comment. Otherwise, I can just copy things over, but I want to see if this will actually work. Oh, one app found. I'm sharing Firefox right now, aren't I?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, I don't know why it's sitting so long on that. There we go. There's Flappy Bird. All right. Let's see if I can get it to Git app, get Flappy Bird. All right. Going to go ahead and install it. That quote there, an insanely irritating, difficult, and frustrating game. That's from a review. Oh no, my comet crashed. Killed my comet. I don't know why I did that. All right, beginning, okay. On my comment, it says, my other comment, it says beginning install, activated install, downloading. Okay, so it's getting started here, but sitting on it for a minute. I don't know. This might be because the WAV files are probably moderately large for things we're storing and transmitting on Urbit right now. 130 kilobytes, 29 kilobytes, 94 kilobytes, 173 kilobytes, 346 kilobytes. Not huge, but a few megabytes all told. Images 24 kilobytes. I don't know why it's taking so long to install. It'll be anyway. While that's spinning in the background, let's go ahead and update our front end so we can actually show this on a table as well. Back to VS Code. Yeah, you can see down here it's installing Flap. All right, so in game.js, what we need to do is we need to add some file, some data that's going to produce some variables here. Let me see if we have any async already. All right, we don't. So I don't think there's a particular order I need on this. All right, so functionally what I'm doing here is I'm going to add some async functions that are going to be able to retrieve key bits of information from endpoints. So this is why I registered those endpoints earlier, because now I can get my response from that URL, return it as text, and produce these things. So now my ship name produces a element ID ship that I can now render inside of that document when I need to, inside of a table. I score does something similar, Flap does something similar, so I'm able to just pull all these things and I'll be able to put them together into a table once I get it. So you know, in the other thing I need to do is when I die, let's find death. I think that was it. State.over. That's where you died. All right, it shows up in a few places. Maybe we should just add this in the well, okay, I'm not actually sure where I wanted to add this, but I'll show you the code and then I'll talk you through it, and then I'll just copy paste the whole version in a minute because I don't want to spend time hunting for that live. All right, so now I'm saying if I'm in a game and my state ticks to over, then I'm going to define a function send score, which will look like this. and so to apps flap, it will post this JSON as a string. Gain, score, score.value. So we've seen this. We know what this is. This is what's actually coming back. And then we'll generate these values, and we'll have a draw table function as well. So this part corresponds to, let me close some of these. I need app flap.home. All right, so this corresponds to in handle HTTP, there's a post, and this is going to DJSON the flap action that I receive. This is asserting I'm receiving a DJS action and processing it through that arm and spitting this value back out to me. All right, fantastic. So I'll put all these in the right spot in a second. All right, so send score does this. We're also going to have some way of drawing a nice table and getting this to run. So our index.html is going to be a little more complicated. Not only are we going to have the canvas like we had a minute ago, but I'm going to add a table here that I'll be able to populate. So my script sits down here right underneath my table, and I'm able to populate this table, and this is where my leaderboard will show up. The game.js that has these changes with the send score and everything. Let me show you draw table too. Draw table loads, it retrieves the list of friends, logs them to output, and then draws a table using React, which you don't need to know specifically in general, but here we're building this in a systematic way. Actually, we're not using React even, are we? We're just building it. All right, so that's our game.js, and we clear the old table too, and add a new one. So they'll be a little more attractive there. All right, let's go ahead and which comment do I need to be in? Oh, I'm interesting. Every time I try and serve this, I'm crashing. The comment just doesn't have enough memory to really handle that. I don't know why that would be the case. I'm not doing anything strange, and I'm running it on my own immediate hardware, so odd to me. Back to some problem here. Well, I'm going to do the bar nuke bar revive thing again. There should be no state, so no changes, and that should work. Well, I might have to bar nuke, bar commit, and then bar revive to get this to behave properly. Yep, okay. Urbit. Okay, so that seems to be working correctly now. All right, let's go back to sharing the target app in Firefox. This is the right one. All right, so now you'll notice down here we're showing our current value, and then if anyone manages to successfully install it, it'll appear in this table down below. However, since this is not dynamic JavaScript, the value only updates when I refresh, and then the table does update, but it's not dynamically updating because we don't have Ajax or whatever the newer dynamic rendering calls upon you. But it will do it every time we update this page. We can update this table here. There's a final version of this that actually has some CSS in it that I can paste here. This is the same sort of table and everything as we had before, but now it actually has like a lot of borders and tables and everything. And we need to add, I think we changed the order of some stuff in here as well for that. See if it likes that. Should just, yeah, okay. All right, so that version now gives us like a nice centered leaderboard with our ship scores and everything. Still won't dynamically update, so it is tracking our current ship behavior. There was this version I had a while back that had like some really bad lag from trying to load something over the wire, like over the network, serving it directly from GitHub instead of from the ship. And it slowed this game down by about 50%. That actually made it like far more playable than it is as it currently stands. All right. So that's our basic process for what we're looking at in doing these things. It's a matter of making sure that you're serving the right pieces from your Urbit ship in the language that Urbit understands, so with the FASs and everything in the right place. And making sure that you can handle JSON events and communications back and forth between ships. So now this can communicate between PALs. You can actually see those updates. If both these comments would install it, then I would demonstrate that part live. But you can see that it does pull the tabular information at the bottom there. Now, if we're going to do this for an arbitrary game, so let's take a look at sand. We've got about 25 minutes left, maybe 25 minutes. So let's take a look at sand and see what's involved with that. Briefly, let me find that URL and copy that for you there, and then share first off that repo, and then all right. So sand, project sand for Urbit. So if you go look at project sand, what you see is it's so it's this kind of game where you can draw on the screen, and material is just falling from the bottom, and then it follows certain rules whenever it hits everything. This is a JavaScript game. That's been written, and so all that we have here is we have a desk and a glob. And if you look at the desk is simply libmar_cert. Desk.mil is empty. There's no contents in it. Lib is, like it has journal.him, but that's probably not even doing anything. But it will serve this from your Urbit ship. And I think Montville actually has this linked, like somewhere you can bar install from it. But let's see if we can just get this working minimally on current Urbit. So let me copy that piece there, switch us back over to VS Code, and then see if we can build this. All right. All right, so here's sand. So on a, okay, so Flap did successfully install in there, so I can actually do that. All right, so let me bar new desk send sand, bar mount sand, and then copy sand desk star, see if we got show on it, sand desk star to comment flap sand and overwrite whatever's there. And then verify that the version I have, sys.kelvin, is 413. Let's change that to 412. And let's try bar commit sand and see if this runs for us. All right, let's try bar install our sand. All right, so now we don't have a glob, and there's no way to fetch an Ames glob. So if you install this normally, let's look at the Docker file. Yeah, it's set up to pull over glob Ames. Well, we don't have a glob. We don't have any way of accessing Ames because we're on a no, we are in a comment, but this is like a bunted piece there. So we're actually because we're this is because we're installing from source, that's why. Okay, so what we're going to need to do, let's look at what's in glob. This has an index HTML that's links to a bunch of JavaScript, junk, and then finally the game.js. Okay, so this is just the file there. All right, so let's go to docket upload and globulate this. All right, so this is localhost 8081 docket faz upload. All right, and for sand, maybe I want to do 8082. Okay, there's sand. And then browse, find that file, which I guess is in AWL.js sand glob. Upload, 11 files suggested, selected, glob. Okay, so now I have a glob file. So I click on sand, transferring data from locals. Okay, so it looks like it's running slow for some reason. I don't know exactly what's going on with the speed thing. It's still loading, but it looks like, basically, okay, now we're serving it directly with the glob attached there. The difference between the way I was doing it in Flap and the way that sand is handled, so both of these are boilerplate, or off-the-shelf, I should say, off-the-shelf JavaScript applications that we're just serving. In the case of Flap, we were explicitly handling everything through our Urbit agent. We didn't glob it. We are explicitly serving it. So it is just a site. In this case, we are actually globbing it and loading it. And I don't know why it's taking forever there, but in principle, if we could get this to run, we could figure out how to add pals to it. All right, so I don't know enough about sand out of the box to say exactly what information we want to share if we want to share things. So let's poke around inside of it and just see what this looks like. All right, so if I look at, there's a bunch of scripts, index HTML, styles, game itself. I think what we would assume is that if two people had this installed and you wanted to share something between them, you would need two things. One of them would be the like an interface to actually load a particular request or load a particular instance. And the other thing would be, how do you actually represent an instance of this on Urbit? So if I go to game.js, drives the primary game loops. Let's see, so a game canvas, I think the game canvas is the piece we're interested in. So this is the canvas config. Okay, so there's that. Maybe elements, let's see. Implementation of all the elements and their interactions. Canvas image data is a byte array where each pixel has 4 entries. Okay, so basically this is a gigantic square array of pixels with 4 values. So if we were going to share this with someone, that's what we would be basically screenshotting and sharing with someone. This actually has the interesting feature that if this is what the canvas is, if it's an RGB and an alpha, this means we should actually just be able to share a PNG of what our current canvas is. That's the actual content that we would need to share. So let's look at, so every one of these has a particular characteristic color, all these values that are defined there. Canvas image data, yeah, okay, that's what we just saw. I think this is still not the original. I'm trying to figure out what the most fundamental state is deriving from. And it might just be coming from canvas here. Game context, where does game context come from? It comes from game canvas, which is just created as create element canvas. Okay, but ultimately, okay, it's a uint32 of game image data.buffer. Which is presumably, so just assigned as our size in these values. And then game state saved, okay, interesting. All right, so let's look at what happens to the game state saved. If you save game canvas, then you can actually save it and use it that way. Okay. Oh, doppeg-tonwel just must have started installing flat, because I just got the moon neighbor update. I don't know why else I'd get that contact there. Okay. Okay, let's look at what's actually happening when we save game image data. Copy it manually. Okay, so presumably this is what we would just do, is we would add some logic here that when we save the game canvas, you could maintain a map on Urbit of all of these instances. Maybe every time you saved, it would give you an option to give it a name or something like that. The simpler thing to do would be to just yield one instance of this, whatever the latest one is that you've shared. There's one of them stored on your Urbit ship. So if we're thinking about what we're doing here, is we're generating save game image data 32, and then what we would add here is an analogy with the game.js stuff from a moment ago. Probably, yeah, we'd have something like this. Here's what we do. We would also say send game state to Urbit and give it save game image data. And then you'd have a function send game state to Urbit that accepts I'm assuming that's a game state. I don't actually know offhand. And then it looks something a lot like this, except instead of posting a flap, we post a sand. And instead of posting this, we would post game state. And then as a good practice, we would have a head tag here, which would be, let's call it a share. So we'd post a JSON that's a share of a board. And you could add other things like a timestamp or whatever here, but this is kind of our fundamental idea here for how we would expose that information, and then we would call it every time we save. And so on the Urbit side, what we would need is something that looks like Sir. We're not going to finish this, but I think we can do some instructive things with it. I'm looking for, not Mar, Sir. Instead of flap, we would do sand. All right, so do we want to keep, all right, so what is a board, right? Let's go back to this is a game state. What is it? What is the game image data 32? I guess it's just a linear array. It's a uint32 array data buffer. Okay, all right. So it's a uint32 array of the size of width times height. That makes sense. What I actually don't know is what a uint32 array is going to do coming into Urbit. So I called it a board here, and that's fine, but I actually don't know what the right parser is going to be for that on Urbit side. So that's something we'll have to figure out to make this. So this would be a share of a board, but what kind of thing is a board, right? So a board is presumably we actually don't need to know DIMs, we don't need to know anything. We just need to have a way of talking to a ship, and the update would be, so the action would be to share with the Urbit. Actually, let's call this a store and a share. So this would be a store, and then a share would be initiated by Urbit between ships, and maybe there would be a anyway. So this would give you this cross communication. Let's see. I'm gonna look up what a uint32 array. Okay, it's just an array of 32-bit unsigned integers. That makes complete sense. Let's poke around a little. Let's do some spelunking in sys Zeus. All right. So in Zeus, we have the actual JSON parsers, DJS. So AR accepts an array as a list. Array is set, array is tuple. I think accepting an array as a list conceptually makes sense to me, but I don't actually know if a uint32 array is the same kind of thing as the JSON array that's being referred to here. So that, sticking a pin in it, that's kind of the point at which we'd have to decide if we're going to receive this thing back to our Urbit ship, what does that actually look like at that point? So probably we're going to call this a list pat UD is going to be a board. And it's going to be a very large list of 32-bit atoms. We can actually specify that. So this won't be coercive, but it will. It's a good mnemonic. So if you, sometimes you might see like pat UVJ to refer to entropy, which is 512 bits. That last uppercase letter refers to the power of 2 that you're talking about. So J is 9 here. So 2 to the 9th is 512. So I would be 256. H would be 28. G would be 64. F would be 32. So pat UDF, this is an annotation that what we expect there is a 32-bit, is a list of 32-bit wide integers. Now we know that this is a byte of red, a byte of green, a byte of blue, and a byte of alpha in an image setup. We actually don't care, right? Like nothing we're doing on Urbit actually needs to know that, because Urbit is just simply going to be a vessel to store this information and then transform it back out on the other side so you can use it. So this is, in this case, what an action and an update would look like on our current system. And you could also imagine defining a load of a board. So when you start this, you load what the last board was from Urbit. So you save it, you load it from Urbit that way. So you can define these components there. And 3:55, so we are just about out of time. So I'm going to stop looking at code there and just ask you what questions you may have about approaching these, that just in general, if you're trying to solve these kinds of problems. What do you think?